And then I kind of joked and I go, I think we'd be lucky to raise $800, So that story's become a little bit of myth over the years. I don't think I genuinely believe we'd only raise $800, but I really was like, what lends us to believe that we're just going to come out of the gate like this and generate 7 figures?
Every business is unique.
But the ups and downs we experience as we launch and run our businesses are pretty similar.
We're Harmon Brothers, the team behind Pooping Unicorns and other weird but successful video ads you've probably seen.
We help businesses grow through unforgettable video marketing, and we're no stranger to tricky situations. In fact, we embrace them.
The goal of this podcast is to show how your crappy circumstances could be the golden opportunity that leads to your next success.
You're watching Poop to Gold.
Welcome back. We are here today with a very special guest. I have the creator of The Chosen, Dallas Jenkins, here with me. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. And this is the first time I've ever done any kind of appearance where the other person is wearing Chosen gear.
And not you.
And not me. So you're wearing a Chosen shirt, one of our signature phrases. I appreciate that. I didn't tell you to do that, right? Like you just should have.
It's true. I have to admit, I am a super fan. This is a little bit of insider ball here that we're
good
playing.
To know.
I'm a co-founder of Angel Studios, no longer involved on a day-to-day basis, and I am one of your original investors in The Chosen.
Yes, you are an investor. Your wife has been an extra.
That's correct.
I don't know. Is she shown up on camera yet?
Yes.
You've seen her? Yeah.
Yeah. She was in season 2, episode 4 by the Pool of Bethesda. She had to jump in the cold water several times.
She was one of the jumpers.
Yep.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I do remember that now.
And in fact, she had originally, put her name out there to be an extra, and she got turned down because her hair is very blonde.
I was gonna say a little too white, a little too Utah.
Yep. Not quite. Doesn't have that Middle Eastern look. Yeah. And so she came home and she was like, Benton, you got to pull some strings here. Like, get me on. I got to be an extra. And I didn't want to be, that guy.
That guy also, if that guy is doing something for his wife, it's a little different. It's a little bit more, little better. Doing it for your wife than for you.
In fact, it would have been totally justifiable. But instead, I just told her that if she wanted to ask Dallas, that she was welcome to, and so she did.
That's right. That's right. She emailed me.
Yeah, she reached out directly to you and said, "Hey, can I be an extra?"
And I went to you and I go, "Why the heck did you allow your wife to email me? Whose idea was that?" No. Yeah, she did great.
Yeah, so I'm excited about this interview. We're actually filming here in Park City, Utah. We are currently at a writing retreat where we are preparing for a marketing campaign produced by Harmon Brothers for The Chosen. You guys have already reached millions and millions of people, but that's just the beginning. Yeah. We've got to reach millions more. Yes. So we're right in the middle of that super fun process, but we're taking a break because I want to dive in with Dallas and talk a little bit about the journey that The Chosen has gone, where, like all startups, you guys started out in relative obscurity. Where
not relative.
Obscurity, period, right? Hard stop.
Yes.
And I wouldn't go so far as to say that you guys have become a household brand.
Yeah, in certain corners, we are the biggest brand out there. In other corners, no one's ever even heard of us. So if household means, if you go out in the street and ask people, have you heard of The Chosen? Most of them say yes. That's not the case currently.
And I think that's totally fine and appropriate, given that, what is this, year 3, 4? What?
Year 3. So
year 3 of this project. Household brands generally take decades to build. When we think of household brands, we're talking about a Nike or an Apple or something like that. But I would argue you guys are well on your way. You're tracking in that direction.
We'll see. We don't have projections. I'm not someone, in fact, we can talk about this later if you want, but I have a very strong philosophy for this particular project that we don't have measurable goals. And that's not something you typically teach on a podcast or on a business workshop. Mm-hmm. And I think it's served us quite well. If we end up becoming a household brand, that'd be lovely, but it's not our pursuit. So when you say something like you're on your way, my response is maybe not. That's not our motivation.
What about the reach a billion people?
Yeah. So that's the one piece that seems to contradict what we're saying. My partner, Daryl Eves, who you know, who's built brands for years, when I used to say things like, I'm trying to reach people for the authentic Jesus, and we started getting into every country in the world, and just Daryl just felt strongly, it's like, we want to reach 1 billion people. Mm-hmm. And so the audience really locked onto that. And I think that number, in Daryl's mind, is more literal. For me, it's a representation of, we want to reach all the corners of the earth. We want to reach as many languages as possible. And on the app, you'll see a counter that shows the views, not necessarily the viewers. It's actually become almost impossible to know how many viewers we have, because so many people watch it in groups. People watch it on things,
various
on devices
platforms
that where we can't measure it. But we have a pretty good handle on the views, how many times each episode has been viewed, and it's well over 300 million at this point. And we put that in the app because, again, the audience really loves seeing the counter go up. They love being able to see that it represents mass. It represents, but the number itself, like in our offices, we're not saying, all right, we just reached our 40th million person, 20 more to get to 60 and 60 more to get to 100. I mean, we just don't think that way. So that really is, it's an authentic representation of where our heart is that we want to reach the masses. But it doesn't reflect what our motivation for doing this is, which our motivation for doing it is to honor God and to make the best show possible. And God will handle the numbers. And you've heard me say this before, it's not my job to feed the 5,000, it's only to provide the loaves and fish. And that's rooted in that famous story in the Gospels, where Jesus took 5 loaves and 2 fish and multiplied it to feed 5,000 people.
You bring your talents to the table.
We bring our 5 loaves and 2 fish, and we make them as good as possible. And we bake really good bread, and we make really good fish, at least we hope, we try. And then when God deems them worthy of acceptance, the transaction's over. And the 5,000 that he feeds, or even that 1 billion that we're trying to reach, is up to him. But we do like to show what's happening. We like to show the progress towards it, because it excites our fans knowing that what they're doing by contributing to the show or by spreading the word is making an impact.
I love it. Your personal story is pretty well documented, and it's out there. So for our listeners, if you don't know Dallas's personal story, we will put in the show notes some links to that.
Yeah, if you look up on YouTube, Dallas Jenkins testimony or Dallas Jenkins, story of the chosen, it's easy to find of how I was, reached total failure, and then the chosen kind of birthed out of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's, if you don't know Dallas, start there. It's well enough documented that I'm not going to spend this interview diving into that. I'm more interested today in this journey from obscurity to where you're at today, and what that looked like and what it felt like. Talk to us a little bit about the very, very early days of this, when no one knew what it was, no one trusted it yet as a high-quality show that was worthy of their time. In fact, initially, you didn't even have investors for it.
So when I made a short film for my church's Christmas Eve service in Illinois, I filmed it on my friend's farm, 20 minutes from my house, and it was only intended for our Christmas Eve service. That was filmed in June or July of 2017. And then I finished it. We filmed it in the summer, even though it was for Christmas, because the weather, obviously it gets so snowy in Chicago. So I finished it, and it just felt really good. And I felt like I was in my wheelhouse. I felt like the story worked. I mean, I felt moved when I would watch it myself. People I'd show it to were like, my goodness, this is wonderful, And I showed it to a friend of mine named Matthew Ferrazzi, who is a marketing guy, and
he happens to be our publicist.
Yeah. So he works with you guys a lot, but he worked with Angel Studios. He doesn't. I don't know where he's at this moment, but he said there's these brothers that I know who have this streaming company that started, and they're looking for original content. Can I show this to them? Because I had mentioned to him, because he was like, he was freaking out about it. And I go, well, actually, while I was making it, I got this idea for a multi-season show about Jesus. There's been movies, there's been miniseries, but there's never been a multi-season show where you get the time to dive into the backstories of the stories we know so well, and the cultural context, and the historical context, and the biblical context even. And we were able to do that in this 20-minute short film just about the birth of Christ. So he says, I want to tell them about your idea. And Jeffrey watched the short film, had a profound experience, like to his credit, he saw, the moment he watched it, he saw so much of what's happened in the last few years.
Yep, this is Jeffrey Harmon.
Yeah. And then he showed it to his brother Neil, who was skeptical, like 98% of our audience is. I mean, I would say 98% of our audience comes into the show reluctant.
Yep.
And that was Neil. And then Neil watched it and had a profound experience. So when they came to me and said, we want to do your show, I got really excited. And then they said, we want to raise the money through crowdfunding, and I got really depressed because I'm like, crowdfunding doesn't work.
You're thinking like a Kickstarter or something.
Well, yeah, and when you're on Facebook and you see someone, trying to raise $200 for some initiative or some, charity or birthday gift or something, and that bar never quite gets to the end of the $200. I'm like, for a show like this to work, for season 1 to be financed and to be effective, at the minimum, I would need $500,000 an episode. And 8 episodes, $4 million. Yeah. That's a minimum. I did the short film for far less than that, but that was 20 minutes. It was for my church. If we're going to be taken seriously, I can do a lot with $500,000 an episode, but that's a minimum, and that's
still super sparse budget.
Minuscule for a period piece. I mean, you kidding me? We'd be filming on friends' farms.
Yeah, calling in favors left and right.
And I said, so I could do it, but let's not get crazy here. And he said, we think we should put the short film out on social media, which again is weird. A 20-minute film watched on Facebook and YouTube is not common, Facebook especially. And at the end of it, you come on and do a pitch to invest. So it's not donations, it's investments. And I thought that would be strange because the investment process was clunky. I mean, I remember when people were investing in the show, we'll skip ahead for a second, it was like 5 stages to do it. You had to read a thing, you had to give your initials, you had to prove something, you had to fill out this information. I'm like, by the time it's time to invest, how many times have you gone through 5 levels just to buy something online?
I know, right? And I think it even involved like putting your routing number and checking account so it can do
for a while they didn't even take credit cards because credit card companies don't typically allow investments.
Right.
Especially in film.
Huge friction.
Yeah, because people end up regretting it. They try to stop the payment, So anyway, it was a lot of barrier to entry, and the minimum that they wanted to offer for the investment was $100. Minimum. So some poor mom in Dubuque who loves the show, but she's not going to put $100 up. I mean, where's she going to do that? So all of their ideas made no sense to me.
By the way, behind the scenes, I remember Jeff brought The Shepherd to me and showed it to me. He said, you've got to see this. This is going to be the next show on Angel Studios. And I remember the surety with which he said that. I remember kind of being like, oh, okay, sure. He must be seeing something. Right. And I've kind of learned to trust his instinct when he kind of has this like sixth sense that says, hey, this is something. Right. I try to like perk up and pay attention because oftentimes he's right. Not always, but oftentimes he is. And so I watched The Shepherd, and then I took it home and my wife watched The Shepherd. And we both, I don't think we saw the vision to the level that Jeff caught it, but we both saw like, this is really, really good. This is moving.
Yeah, so that's what ended up happening. I'll get to that in just a second. But all of their ideas behind crowdfunding, I've said, the all-time crowdfunding record is $5.7 million from projects that had big fan bases already. So Mystery Science Theater 3000 does a crowdfund for some big thing that they're going to do. The other one, I'm blanking on the name.
Wasn't it Veronica Mars?
Yeah. And they hugely popular show, huge fan base. They're going to do a movie. Let's crowdfund it, $5.7 million. That's the all-time record. And I'm like, we're nothing. I'm coming off of a career failure. My last movie bombed at the box office. And they introduced me to Daryl Eves, who is now my partner, who is a brand builder and an audience builder. And we hit it off. And he watched the episode, and he had a profound spiritual experience. So he was all in on it. And so we partnered together, and we launched this thing. I went to a close friend of mine who's got a lot of means, and I said, we're trying to raise, I think at the time it was $200,000 because we needed to get the rights to The Shepherd from the church.
Right.
Because they were the ones who'd put up money for it. And so for them, it was a huge win because they were able to show this, we paid them $100,000 for the rights to The Shepherd, which meant that they now had a free, and we said, look, you'll still show it in your Christmas Eve services, but now you didn't have to pay anything for it. Like you ended up, making a little profit on it, on this show. So for them, it was a great win. And then for us, $100,000 for the rights to the shepherd, which again aren't even the rights to the show, because the Bible, the copyright of the Bible is free.
Yep.
So it's not like the church owned the rights to our show. We were just saying we wanted the ability
To use
the shepherd
Yep.
on social media, and by doing that, we are in many ways, there may be people who watch it on social media instead of coming to the church for that big Christmas Eve experience. So so for a little project like that, $100,000 is a ton of money. I mean, people typically when they option a book, it has to be massively successful to spend that kind of money. So for us, we really wanted to be honoring and respectful of the church for what they had built with this little short film. So we did that, and then we needed money for writers to pay my co-writers and I to do an outline and some sketches of the first 4 episodes, and just some general operating expenses, legal expenses, stuff like that. So my friend helped, and then a friend of Daryl's and Jeffrey's helped, and then Daryl put in some, and so the 4 of us were and also Matthew Ferrazzi, who also came in. So we were the original 5 co-founders of The Chosen LLC.
Yep.
This little business that's now going to open itself up to thousands of potential investors for crowdfunding and join us in this. So I'm like, I thought the idea was ludicrous. I really did.
So at this point, are you thinking like, this is nuts, but what do I have to lose?
It was a loaves and fishes. My job is not to feed the 5,000. My job is to provide the loaves and fish. I'm providing my loaves and fish. We tell a joke. We joke about it, because I once kind of jokingly said to Jeffrey, I said, well, we'll be lucky to raise $800,000 for this thing. And then I kind of joked and I go, I think we'll be lucky to raise $800. So that story's become a little bit of myth over the years. I don't think I genuinely believe we'd only raise $800, but I really was like, what lends us to believe that we're just going to come out of the gate like this and generate 7 figures, much less what I think we probably need, which is probably closer to $1 million an episode. That would be ideal. So
it almost seemed outlandish.
Yeah, well, of course it does. The all-time record is 5.7 million. We're gonna break the record based on a short film I did for my church's Christmas Eve service, when I'm a filmmaker that no one cares about. So we created a Facebook page, and we're going to launch this short film on the Facebook page. So we had all our friends and family, like the page, follow the page, and then when we launch the short film, when we post it on the page, make sure and Daryl, who's the social media guru, had all these, rules, like in the first hour, make sure you like it, but that you're not only commenting on it, you're responding to others' comments. Mm-hmm. So if someone says, this looks great, then you respond and go, yeah, I agree, and like, let's share it. So you click the share button, here's how you share it, but let's do it in waves of every 15 minutes or so. And so we put it on our little Facebook page.
You're trying to leverage the algorithm, right?
Yeah, so at the time we ended up starting out with about 400 followers. Mm-hmm. I had a little bit of a fan base from previous movies that I was able to just kind of go, hey, come over here and like this page. And Daryl did too, so we're just a few hundred people. Pretty quickly, the algorithm kicked in, but what we saw was people were watching the whole thing, all 20 minutes. And pretty early on, we saw that when people watched the show, so in this case it was just the short film, but this was a principle that ended up proving true long term, which we'll get into. They became fanatical. I mean, their response was, it wasn't just, I love this is great. There was this, people described having a profound guttural experience, and that when I came on at the end and said, we're thinking about doing a show and you can invest, they were like, I've never done this before. I don't normally do things like this. But I have to be involved. They felt this guttural need to be involved. And so they, at that stage, because we hadn't been SEC qualified yet, we were doing what's called an interest round. It's you go to our website, you fill out these forms, and you express the interest that you have, that when we do open up investment,
you're not actually making an investment. You're just saying, I'm interested in making an investment.
Angel Studios now calls it a testing the waters campaign. Let's make sure we've got something here. Well, it was just immense from right off the bat. Was, hundreds of thousands, then millions, then, the numbers just kept climbing. Now, of course, it wasn't real yet, but it was clear that something transcendent was taking place. The reaction to a 20-minute short film I did on my friend's farm was greater than the sum of its parts. It was better than I'm capable of. I consider myself a pretty good filmmaker. I'm not that good to get the kind of response it was getting. And so we then launched our qualifying with the SEC. You fill out these forms. I resigned from my job, so now I have no job, but I'm banking on the promise that all these people who've expressed what turned out to be $18 million worth of interest, some of them $1 million, like they would click the $1 million tab, like that's what they wanted to invest. I'm thinking, well, okay, I should feel pretty confident. So I, resigned from my job.
What did that decision feel like?
Well, there were other factors going into all that. I mean, I was headed in that direction anyway.
Was it scary?
Well, 100%. What made it scary was not the resignation, which I did like 3 months before the end of the year, but during those 3 months I was looking for jobs, some source of income. Nothing was happening. No, I mean, it was just everything was striking out. And I'm like, what kind of skill sets do I bring to the table? I'm a filmmaker. I was looking at other churches to work at because I'd been working at a church. I'd made movies. I mean, but nothing was making sense. And so then when I officially resigned on December 31st, and now I'm officially jobless, benefits gone. We ended up doing one of those Christian health share. It's called Samaritan Ministries, which I will forever be grateful to. So it was scary for sure. And it got scarier by the day because the SEC ended up taking upwards of 5 months to qualify us. And so what we thought was, once we're qualified for investment, enough money will come in and I'll be able to get a salary as the director of the show.
Keep food on the table.
Yeah. And of course we had that little seed money that I mentioned earlier that paid for us to write some of these initial scripts, but it was intentionally low. We weren't paying ourselves exorbitant salaries. I mean, the show didn't exist yet. So we were paying ourselves as little as we could. And then, at one point, and then about 2 months into it, we had more health crises in my family than we'd had in the previous 20 years combined. My daughter shattered her collarbone. My other daughter had a rupture in one of her, I don't even remember what it was. It was like one of her small intestines or something like that.
Spleen or
something.
something?
Yeah, something like that. It was, and then I had 4 months into it, I had a massive
appendicitis?
Appendicitis, yes, in the hospital for 3 days.
Oh man!
And so we're relying on these medical Samaritan Ministries works, and
hence why you'll forever be grateful.
Yeah. You put in, everyone puts in something each month, but then when there's a crisis, then you start actually literally getting checks from other people around the country. Their $500 for that month is going directly to you. But I remember early on, I think it was February, where I hadn't had a job for a month. We were barely getting by based on maybe a little bit of savings, based on the fact that I was getting a little as the writer. And a show, the SEC was taking forever. And there was, of course, still no promise that it's going to work once we do officially launch. And we just felt led to involve our children in the process instead of keeping them out of the painful part of just saying, if God's going to be faithful and is going to show up in this situation, and if something great ends up coming out of this, we want our kids to know where we came from. And so we told our kids, right now, Dad doesn't have income coming in. And you just had this health crisis, and you just were in the hospital 3 days. Did you know that we don't actually have health insurance? We have this medical sharing thing. And so what's going to happen, what we believe is going to happen in the next couple of months, is we're going to start getting checks from people all around the country. They're going to pay for this. And this is God's people at work, supporting each other. We just want you to see that in action. But right now, it's nothing. And we don't even know if this show is going to work. And Dad is working very hard to find other alternatives. And just so you know, if Dad ends up applying for a job at manager at Burger King, he's going to do that because we're going to provide.
We're going to make it work.
But right now, we don't know what the future holds. And so let's pray, not necessarily that God's going to, provide wealth or anything like that. We're just going to pray that God's going to be faithful in this, and that we're going to maintain focus on Him, and that our main priority is serving God. So sure enough, we ended up in those 3 or 4 months not ending up paying a dime in any of the literally $100,000 worth of medical expenses that we had. At one point, my partner, Daryl, God bless him, at one point just said, I'm going to give you some money, for a couple months. What do you need just to,
To hold you over.
Well, he wasn't even asking to hold you over. It was, what do you need? And I go, well, just enough to hold me over. But he's like, I'm not letting you get another job. Like, you're working 18 hours a day. I mean, I was working. I was on Facebook responding to comments. I was the guy. I mean, I was literally, because Darryl was busy. He owned multiple businesses. And then for The Chosen, he was doing audits and paperwork for the SEC and dealing with lawyers. And I was busy trying to keep the train moving with interest in the show. So I'm commenting on Facebook, responding to every comment. We ended up several months later hiring our first part-time assistant just to help with things like that. But I was up all night. So he was like, I'll just pay you out of my own pocket, just so you're not, going into debt or having to get another job. And then it was June or July when it went official. Finally, the SEC qualifies us, and now we can officially launch. And Jeffrey will admit, Harmon, that based on previous experience that he'd had with a similar investment crowd fund for Angel Studios, that he's like, he really thought we're going to get the money we need in a week, maybe even a weekend. I mean, it's because, all these people that have committed, there's no reason for them not to stick with their commitment.
Was $18 million worth of people who had said, I want to invest.
Yes. So worst case scenario, we get half of that. That's still what we need. And so we launched, we sent out the email, sent out the social media thing.
But this is months later, right? Because of that SEC process. So all those people who had said, yeah, I want to invest.
Yeah, we had cut off the interest round. We'd cut it off on December 31st. So then that was just the interest round. So there were 6 months had gone past. We'd emailed them to keep them updated. And so we launched, and that weekend we did $1 million. And it was, and in normal world, that would be amazing. Crowdfunding $1 million in a weekend for a project. But in terms of how much we'd spent and how much was being built and what we were needed, I mean, it was a huge disappointment. And then we started strategizing, and
I think it's important for the listeners to understand that these crowdfunding campaigns, it's not like you just turn it on and $18 million worth of interest just shows up.
Right.
This is a marketing campaign, right? There is effort behind it. There's ad buying behind it. There's investment behind it. So when you say what you had spent,
well, I will say this: for our project, the short film had such a profound effect on people. We got a little cocky. So when I say what we had spent at that point, that was legal fees. That was now Angel Studios did spend some money. I think it was about $100,000, maybe a little bit more than that, on kind of fueling the fire at the end. Like in the last month, they
in terms of advertising,
getting the short film out there even more. There was an endorsement that we got from a few influencers, and we promoted their videos that they did. And so some money had been spent, but again, it was money on scripts, money on legal fees, and Dallas Jenkins not having a job for 6 months. I mean, we had given quite a bit. So that first $1 million comes in, but it's kind of stagnant, and people are, and again, it's clunky to invest. It takes you 5 steps, to do so. And then we didn't take credit cards right away, and a lot of people didn't want to use credit cards, or didn't want to use their bank routing info to do it. So all of that stuff was a high barrier to entry and just made it difficult. And we're like, oh my gosh, is this going to work? And then I remember Jeffrey saying, we're going to have to spend money out of the fundraise for marketing to get more. And I'm like, no way, that wasn't part of the deal. That doesn't work. And he's like, well, what did you think? This is just going to get... Now, the answer is probably in the middle. I think Jeffrey thought we would get more than we did. I didn't think we would have to spend money. I'm like, well, if people aren't interested, then this isn't going to work. And he's like, well, yeah, they need to be made aware. So we started taking, as the money was coming in, we'd take a portion of that and put it towards the marketing of the short film and the investment. And slowly but surely it started to build. And when we got to the 4 million, 5 million mark, that's when we decided, let's go ahead and make the first 4 episodes. And that will give momentum, and people will see it's happening, and that will take this to the next level instead of waiting until we get all 8. That'll just take too long. So what's funny is we start filming, and it actually drastically slowed down investment for 2 reasons. One, I wasn't out there anymore, kind of. We call it dancing for nickels. Dallas getting on TV and on live streams, and it very clearly early on proved. And I'm not saying this with any arrogance. It just became objectively true that Daryl's thesis was correct. Daryl had said this needs to be an influencer model, meaning you're the show. Now, of course, Jesus is the show, and we're not saying that anything different than that. But Dallas as the, you need to be telling your story. People need to trust you. They need to know you. They need to see the inside, behind the scenes of how this is coming together. And whenever I shared my heart in these live streams, whenever I did videos, it or sent emails directly from myself, not in a marketing way, but in a, here's what I'm passionate about, here's what we're doing, here's the story of how this is going, here's some inside baseball on it. People got really...
And I think it's important that we don't just glaze over that because that's actually an innovation in and of itself. Right? If you look at traditional Hollywood and, choose your filmmaker, Christopher Nolan or whoever, they go build a film, they're behind the curtain working for months or years on that film, and there's no audience interaction until it's time to start marketing it.
Well, and even then, I mean, how many directors do you think, if they walked on the street, would be recognized by a third of the population? I mean,
very few.
You could probably count on one hand, if that, maybe Steven Spielberg, but like, I could tell you people who love his movies who still wouldn't know what he looked like.
That's right.
It's very rare for the director to be the one out front.
They're behind the camera, not in front of it.
Yeah, and I was out front as I wasn't influencing necessarily yet. Hopefully I was, but I was the face of the operation out there constantly with videos and vlogs and live streams. So I stopped doing that for the most part when I started making the show, and that slowed things down. The other thing was, I think subconsciously people were like, oh, they're making it. Mission accomplished. And so we saw a just dramatically decreasing investment happening. So it was at 5 million, and then it creeps up over 5. And I remember when it did finally break the crowdfunding record, that was a huge deal. We made a big deal out of that, and that kind of gave it a little bit more juice. Mm-hmm. And we put out a video too of Jeffrey and Neil and Daryl and I sharing the kind of the origin story. We put that video out on social media, and it was emotional, and people were intrigued by that. That helped, but we were doing things like that to try to generate more income and passion for the show. And then December came, and we decided to put on a deadline. Let's say that we're going to make season 1 for whatever we get, and this is what we need. But if we don't get 8 million, which is what we need for production, then we're going to tell people we're not going to do the next 4 episodes. We're going to just use that money for marketing. But people really wanted episodes, and so I did a series of, I wouldn't call it a series. I did 2 8-hour live streams where I sat in my office and talked for 8 hours. We would show video clips every now and then, but I did an 8-hour live stream and then another one 2 days later. And I remember we raised, in the last couple of weeks, we raised about $4 million, and in the last 2 days it was like $800,000 the first day, and then another like 900 or $1 million the next day.
It's amazing how FOMO kind of kicks in at the end.
Yeah, of course, yeah. The deadline had a huge difference. The live stream was fun. We did, and I think people got caught up in the excitement of, and I'm calling out, Benton just invested $1,000 and, whatever it was, and people got excited about that. We had actors come on the show and just made it a fun thing. And I remember when we hit that $10 million mark, I mean, it was emotional. I mean, it was a what the H just happened? Like, and I brought Daryl on at the end of the live stream. He was just crying, and my wife and I are crying and just going, 6 months ago, I didn't have a job. Like 8 months ago, we were, desperately grabbing on to each check that came into the mail to pay back our medical debt. And here we are, now we have all the money we need for the first season of a show, $1 million an episode. It just blew our minds. We'd only had to spend about 10% of that, probably more like 8% of that on marketing, a smaller amount on legal and logistical fees. And of course, Angel gets their cut for building the website and doing all the logistics and all that. But we had our $8 million for production. It was extraordinary.
I appreciate this look behind the curtain, because so often when the story gets told that, hey, The Chosen raised $11 million or just shy of $11 million to make season 1, it's kind of glossed over like it was, snap your fingers and it happened. But I was fortunate enough to kind of have a behind the scenes seat throughout it all. One, because we got to jump in and help you guys with the ad buying side of that fundraise.
Yeah, we engaged a Harmon Brothers agency for a couple months to add.
Yeah, to get some help with that, right? And then also, my connection to Jeff and Neil over at Angel Studios kind of gave me a look behind the scenes of what they were doing. And so not only were you and Daryl, grinding for months and months to make that a reality, the same thing was happening over at Angel Studios. And I got a peek into that of just how much work and effort was going into doing things that had just never been done before. So it wasn't like there was a recipe that anyone could follow. Everything was trial and error, and let's figure this out. Okay, so let's jump ahead a little bit now. So that was an inflection point where the money got raised for season 1. Then you were able to go out and make the next 4 episodes. So season 1 has 8 episodes.
Yeah. So the first 4 episodes were released around Easter of 2019, and then we started filming the next 4, and so episodes 5 through 8 came out in the latter part of 2019.
Okay, talk to me about how now. So we talked about the obscurity that you went through and the grind that it took to build out of that. Talk to me what it looks like as you get this show out into the wild. And what it's like trying to build momentum on a brand new show.
So the struggle is, how do you monetize this? I mean, so we spent $8 million.
Because it has to be a business to sustain itself, right?
Of course, yeah. So how do we monetize this so that long-term investors get paid back, that we get enough to make future seasons? And, obviously we want to keep this going for a while. And at the time, VidAngel was the streaming platform on which the show was placed. And so in order to watch the show, the initial plan was you have to get a subscription to VidAngel.
Which VidAngel is the predecessor to what is now Angel Studios.
Yeah, and they were primarily known for their filtering. And so this was their first, other than Dry Bar Comedy, which was a stand-up comedy series, primarily had made its bones on YouTube and Facebook, but was their kind of signature original piece of content. So this was their first major piece of content, original. And the idea was people will be so eager to watch the show, they'll subscribe to Angel Studio, VidAngel at the time, and they'll subscribe to it, and that'll be similar to how shows like House of Cards caused people to want to subscribe to Netflix, or Game of Thrones to HBO. Well, it's hard to convince people, especially when you don't have a big marketing budget, to go get a subscription to a new platform and for them to hear about it.
So the show's an unknown, and the platform is an unknown, which makes it
so the platform had a little bit of buy-in, and the people who had subscribed already were loved it. But there were a lot of people, the kind of people who are going to be the early adopters of a Jesus show are going to be older, because most people have a really negative reaction towards Christian content, a really negative reaction towards Bible shows or movies. The older generation, a little bit more, message oriented and less focused on quality. So they have fewer barriers of entry in their minds and hearts. And most of our investors were I would say over 90% of our investors were older. So they're going to watch the show first, of course, but they don't understand the app. They're struggling with it. And so we put it on a website. And the plan was, okay, on the website, the first episode is free, and then you pay $29.99 to unlock the other episodes. Well, $29.99 is a lot of money for a show. You're not paying that much for 4 episodes on Amazon or iTunes or anything like that. So it was just too expensive for people. It was too clunky for people. It didn't fit into their usual pattern of watching. And so then we realized people were like wanting DVDs, because that's just easier. And so we thought, well, let's put it on DVD and sell DVDs. And then that took time, and we're not a DVD, VidAngel at the time wasn't a DVD distribution company, so they're kind of making that up as they go along, and that was clunky. But we finally get DVDs out. So everything was moving snail's pace, and the money was minuscule early on, and with no real promise that things were going to get easier, other than when people watched it, they were not only fans of it, they were fanatical. I mean, they were obsessive about telling people. And the social media was growing. And so they were going out on social media, they were following our page was growing, our YouTube videos were starting to do well. So there was this piece of...
This growing group of super fans.
Yeah, when they watch it, they are white hot. Like, and there's a difference between loving something and being obsessed about it. And they were obsessed. And so that was the main promising piece of it, was that when people watch it, they get obsessed. And it was one of the reasons why we gave them episode 1 for free, because the ending of episode 1 was so powerful for people. But again, episode 1, kind of a slow burn. It's a traditional pilot episode of a show as opposed to a Bible pilot where you're just showing everything from the Bible and everyone recognizes it. So it took people time to figure that out. So, and plus, even if you love it, if you can't figure out how to watch the rest of the episodes, if you don't want to watch them on your computer or website, whatever, it just became difficult. So it was a slow crawl, and we're trying different ideas, but it was, that first 8 months or so. Well, I guess Easter was when it started, and then the second half of the season came in around Christmas. That certainly gave it a boost, but it was slow going until the idea came to do an app, a chosen app. And Angel had developed this technology where you could cast it to your TV from your phone. Mm-hmm. And you didn't need a subscription to Roku, you didn't need a subscription to Apple TV, you didn't need a subscription to Amazon. It would directly connect to those platforms and you could watch it. And so the app started to help a little bit, still clunky though. I mean, they're building a brand new phone app.
Yep, it's beta software, they're building it.
So it's clunky. And of course, that doesn't help our older crowd. That makes it even worse. So they still have it on the website. They're still getting DVDs, but we're noticing we're selling DVDs at a pretty crazy rate considering that DVDs are almost dead. So that was clunky still. And then Harmon's came up with this idea called Pay It Forward, which is, okay, so we'll make the show free for a few more episodes, because that's when people really get excited about it. And to watch all 8 episodes, you can pay it forward, which will then unlock streams for other people. So much like how Twitch worked. I don't know how it works today, but we can't give the show away for free because streaming costs money. Every time someone streams an episode, it costs money. It's a little bit here, more in certain countries than others, but people all over the world are wanting to watch this. Once we launched the app, every country in the world, people were downloading it because they had heard about the show. So the problem was, because no one in other countries was paying it forward, whether they're because of poverty or because the app wasn't in their language, or you couldn't pay it forward in pesos or yen or whatever, it's still a very American thing. So what we did was, while you're watching, when you pay it forward, it tells you how many people can now watch it for free. But it would also, on the app, would tell you how many people were waiting for a free stream. So let's say you're in another country, you watch episode 1, you watch episode 2, you get to episode 3, and they go, someone needs to pay it forward for you to be able to watch this. Or if you want, you can pay it forward yourself. Well, most people couldn't pay it forward, so they're just waiting. And that counter of people waiting went so high that people who were we were hoping to induce them to pay it forward, but the number was so high, it was almost overwhelming. They felt like they couldn't make a dent. So there was this psychological distance. So everything about the process is clunky in some way, even though the app was improving in its quality. I'm not saying that the process itself was flawed, even though there were some flaws inherent to it. But there was nothing really easy about getting people to watch it. There was an inherent hurdle in that most people think Christian entertainment is bad. The people who love Christian entertainment are worried that a show about Jesus is going to be blasphemous or Hollywoodized. People don't have time. People certainly don't have time to get a new app. They don't want to pay. So there were so many barriers of entry that, like I said earlier, so much of the audience was reluctant. But we had the people who saw it.
The super fans.
Were like going, you have to. I'm going to sit you down and watch this. And I remember there were certain little touch points where, like, one guy convinced dad who was a pastor of a mega church in Michigan. Like he forced him to watch it. And then the guy gave his sermon online where he said, I didn't want to watch it. Here was my resistance to it. Here's why. And people are going, yeah, me too, me too. And he goes, and then I watched it and I was undone. And I need you to watch it. And so things like that kept happening. But it still wasn't easy.
I think for all the entrepreneurs who are hearing this, they're all just going to be shaking their heads like this, like, yeah, like that's what startup life is just this grind of just friction, experiment before you ever find these breakthroughs. For the non-entrepreneurs who are hearing this might be kind of an aha of like, oh wait, The Chosen just didn't come out of the gate and explode?
Well, and for me, I was a non-entrepreneur. And the friction that happened a lot of times between myself and particularly Jeffrey Harmon, partially because we're very similar in our obsessions and our perfectionism and our vision and whatnot, creativity. These kinds of things didn't faze him. He was like, yeah, we're figuring this out as we go. And I'm like, well, the show itself wasn't that way. Like that was the thing.
You planned it and you made it.
The product that we were selling wasn't a guinea pig product, other than the fact that it was a Jesus show. There'd never been a Jesus show before. But I mean, my cast and crew weren't trying some new things for the first time and trying a new camera and seeing if it worked. I mean, so I was kind of like, the show piece is, I almost kind of expected.
Felt chaotic.
I'm like, I'm bringing the show, you guys are bringing this, but the show wasn't the first time I'd ever done this, but the app was the first time that they'd ever done it. And so there was this, like the show was ready, the app wasn't. And then the app got ready, but the show was done and the first season was already out. So people were like, what's next? So it's just constant. Nothing about it was easy. And so it's not easy to convince people to watch it because they have inherent biases against the content. And it's not easy to get people to watch it because they don't want to get a new app. They don't want to pay them for it, whatever it is.
To Angel Studios' credit, the number of iterations that they did in terms of testing on that app, it was pretty amazing. I've seen very few software teams who can iterate that quickly.
Angel's very scrappy. I mean, they're very, like, they're like, in their little lab, makeshift lab, just grinding it out and pounding nails and duct tape and string.
But I'm sure that from your perspective, a lot of that was a bumpy ride because so much of those experiments, one, they don't work, or two, they're filled with bugs and all sorts of stuff like that.
Yeah. So when you go, okay, I've made my gift and I'm now ready to present it to the world, but and then it falls off the counter and breaks the first time it's released or whatever. You just go, oh gosh, this is painful. So many barriers of entry, and the show was crawling along. Bad news was it was going slow. Good news was it was clear something was happening. It was clear that we just needed to get people to watch it. And so then I came to Jeffrey and I said, what if we made the show for a few weeks? Then the pandemic hit. Mm-hmm. So now people are home, people are losing their jobs, everyone's in crisis. People have time now to watch the show. And I go, what if, just as a goodwill gesture, we make the show totally free for like 3 weeks? Just totally free, all 8 episodes, every country in the world. And that became a slogan, like, all 8 episodes, every country in the world, totally free, And we'll do it for a few weeks. And we'll lose money because, it's streaming costs money. But let's just do that. And I said, what if we launched it on YouTube? So one night a week, over the course of 8 nights, we'll show one episode a night. And before and after each episode, I'll just tell people, this is free. It's going to be free all week. It's on YouTube. YouTube's easy for you, for those of you who struggle with the app. But each night, I'm going to show them how to work the app. I'm going to let them know that if they download the app now, they don't have to wait the rest of the week to watch the other episodes. They can watch all 8 episodes on the app. The app's easier than you think. And, here's how you do it. And it casts to your TV and yada, yada, yada. And I also said, look, the reason we're doing this is because a lot of you can't afford to watch the show for free. But just so you know, it does cost money. And so if you do have the means to pay it forward, please do, because that's going to be what allows us to do future episodes and seasons. And so we were hopeful that they would be able to pay it forward enough to at least just cover the cost of the streams, So the first night we launch on YouTube, and the reason I mentioned that Jeffrey and I talked about it, because it's such to Angel's credit that they were willing to put the show on another platform, because it's in many ways you can consider it a competitor. But I think we were all just like whatever it takes, and this will be a goodwill gesture anyway. And that first night, our income quadrupled. And the next night, it quintupled. And it was like that was the first tipping point. There's been others that have come that have accelerated, but that was people saw it easily, and they didn't have to pay a thing. They didn't even have to sign up. We told them you don't even have to give your email address, just you get to watch it. And they were having the same experience they had when they watched the short film, where they just felt the need to contribute in some way. And so we told them too, we're not a nonprofit, right? This isn't a donation. It's just, you're just paying, you're just choosing to pay. But if you can't pay for it, don't. I don't want you to. Enjoy the free show. And it exploded. That's when it really took off. And the app downloads started going crazy, and we ended up in the top, at one point we were in the top 10. At one point we were in the top 5. That was when season 2 launched. But in all entertainment apps in the world, we actually were above Disney Plus at one point for apps. So people downloading the app at a crazy rate, talking about the show. The fact that we were giving it away was buzzworthy. Mm-hmm. And I remember I came home to my wife, who was freaked out at the notion of giving the show away for free. Because we had been defending people. We were already getting criticism from people who were like, it's a Jesus show and you're charging people money. And we're like, we have a business to run. I have to feed my family. Like, we have to somehow pay our investors back. I remember when I told her about this free option, and she was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And I remember when I told her that first night what was happening, and she said she felt like God, like a thunderbolt, just as clear as day, just said to her, the gospel is free. And it's... I remember we knew in that moment that the show's going to be free forever. And Jeffrey and Neil were on board. I mean, we all just got it. Amanda got it first. I think probably night 4 is when the rest of us were like, this is going to work. But the notion of the gospel is free, so the show is going to be free, and we will give people the option to pay for it if they want. And again, it fits into that whole loaves and fishes thing of, okay, it's not our job to try to feed the 5,000 and try to finance the show ourselves. Like, we're just going to trust. And if the show should continue, then it will, because people will be compelled to do it. And so it was maybe a week into it, we decided, I think we announced, you know what, I talk directly to the viewer. And that's a huge thing. This is off topic, but whenever I do live streams or do videos, I talk to one person. I don't talk to, hey guys, I'm talking to one person. And I just said, your passion and investment in this show, and you're paying it forward even when you don't get anything in return for it, is what has allowed people all over the world to watch it. And I would read letters from people that were so changed by the show. And because of that, we're going to keep it free forever. The Chosen will always be free. There will be other options to pay for it on other platforms or whatever, but there will always be an option to watch the show free. And we've never looked back. And it's not secret that we've since generated tens of millions of dollars. Our apparel, that was another thing on the live streams. I would say, look, there's another way. You could purchase the shirts or a Bible study or devotional book. And we made a decision to always make sure that all of our products that we offered were legitimately meaningful and not just a promotional item. But this is going to cause a conversation, or this is going to bless you spiritually from reading it, or whatever it was. And I think just we never, the fundraising mechanism of encouraging people to pay it forward or to purchase our gifts, I think with few exceptions, people believe, and it's true, that it comes from an authentic place of, we want to give you something great and we want to impact your life. And if you want to keep it going, here's how you do it. Yep. But we're not going to beg you.
It can't be a reality without you.
And it's not going to be markety. We're not going to be, I'm just going to tell you the truth and leave it in God's hands. And that has been significant. And since then, the show's only grown at an exponential rate.
In entrepreneur speak, there's this term that Paul Ahlstrom coined, nail it, then scale it. And in the early days of getting a business off the ground, the nail it phase is a painful process of figuring it out and experimenting and testing and trying and everything. And then eventually you break through and you figure it out. You have the recipe, and then you go into scale it mode. And oftentimes entrepreneurs don't get a clear moment to know when that transition is. Yeah. Sometimes it's a little bit more gray, I guess, yeah. And the transition is more foggy. But in the case of The Chosen, there was that breakthrough of give the show away for free and ask the viewers to pay it forward. And that was the inflection point where you guys went into scale-up mode.
And I think one of the things that also was clunky about the nail it, scale it principle was some of the scale was happening without our, before we'd nailed it, without our attempts. I mean, meaning some things were building so much and other countries were discovering it and
legs of
demanding
its
more,
own.
and that we couldn't keep up with. And then you've also got, and I think they would admit this, I think Jeffrey and Neil they love new ideas, new things. As soon as we discovered, okay, the app, like at first they were trying to nail the VidAngel side of the things. And then DVDs come along, we're going to try to nail that. It took us time to even figure out what needed to be nailed, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think I think Jeffrey Neal would acknowledge it took them time to realize, okay, this thing isn't going to be the thing that the show is going to be launched on, and then try again. You know, this thing isn't it either. And so you end up unintentionally wasting a lot of time trying to nail the wrong thing, and it's no one's fault. You took time to figure out. And then, but the good news about Jeffrey and Neil is they are quick to come up with that thing. And the idea of the pay it forward was that first step towards the free element that unlocked it. And you know, the rest is history.
I know we're out of time, Dallas. I've enjoyed the heck out of this conversation.
I feel like I ended up telling that story. It became a speech. I didn't mean to talk so much, but you kind of set me up. You're like, oh, just tell the story of obscurity. I'm like, well, that's about an 8-month story. So
no, I think there's going to be a lot of people who enjoy this look behind the curtains, because a lot of times from the outside looking in, when you see a success, it feels like an overnight success. But the reality is there was a lot of hustle and a lot of grind that went on for a long time to make it that overnight success.
Yeah, for me, it took 20 years. For the Harmons, maybe a little less. They're a little younger than I am, but not even just in the last 4 years, but leading up to what got them to the place where they were ready to pursue a show like this. I mean, there was ups and downs in that process too. So yeah, it took 20 years to become an overnight success.
That's right. Okay, let's wrap up. One final question. What piece of advice do you have going into 2022 for our listeners?
Well, I've already said it, and it might feel like a cliche at this point, because I've said it so many times, but I have to remind myself of it, is that whole, it's not your job to feed the 5,000, it's only to provide the loaves and fish. Whether you are a believer in God or not, whether you are doing a project or something that is spiritual by nature, that concept, I think, applies universally. I for over 40 years of my life was someone who was pretty good at solving problems and coming up with solutions, and then when a result didn't come, I would analyze why, and I'm good at analysis. And when I got to that place where I truly surrendered and really focused solely on making sure I was doing the best 5 loaves and 2 fish that I can, and giving it to God, and then being comfortable with the transaction being over, it is a life changer. And if you truly embrace it, if you truly make it real, and it takes practice, it takes changing some of your habits, even some of your emotional habits, it becomes a superpower. And so in 2022, I'm going to hopefully continue that practice from my work, but also spiritually, and then also when it comes to audience reaction. I mean, so many people base their emotional stability on how many likes or dislikes they get, the comments they get on YouTube or Facebook, or Amazon reviews or whatever. And every single day, multiple people, dozens and dozens of people every day, either post a video or a comment publicly about me that is hateful, or about how dangerous I am, or how the show is blasphemous, or how the show is going to bring people away, or Dallas is a false prophet or a fraud. And I genuinely don't care. It genuinely doesn't bother me. I find it funny. We actually post one of those comments a week and just have fun with it. But just as important is that I'm not motivated by the people who will tell me that I'm the greatest thing ever and that the show changed their life, and that if they met Dallas Jenkins, their life would be complete. You know, that's when I'm sitting down in front of the blank page for season 3 doesn't give a rip how season 2 did. It doesn't give a rip about the comments I'm getting on YouTube. I cannot write or direct thinking about avoiding criticism or seeking the praise. And if you get to that place where you truly don't care, as long as the content that you are creating or the product that you are creating is great and what you set out to do and what you believe God wanted you to do, or whatever it is, whether you're a believer or not, if you can get to that place where you do not get motivated by avoiding dislikes or seeking likes, it's life-altering.
Bring your loaves and fishes and then surrender it.
Yep. And everyone on this project, from the actors to the crew to my partners and everything, have a similar story of the chosen came along at the moment when they finally totally were broken and surrendered. Actors, so many of our actors were like, I was giving up on the business, I was quitting the business, and then the script for The Chosen came along and my life was changed. And I do believe God, I do believe it's not a coincidence. I believe God is doing something in the lives and the people who are making the show, and also in the people who are watching it. But yeah, I'm pounding that nail constantly with people. It's not your job to feed the 5,000. Just provide the best loaves and fish.
Thank you, Dallas.
Thank you
Appreciate
for
you being
having
on
me.
the show.
Yeah.
All right. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you on the next one.
Want to learn the tricks of our trade? We have them all laid out in our courses on Harmon Brothers University. This isn't surface level stuff here. This is our entire playbook, all our secrets laid out in full. The same training we give our own employees. You'll find courses on ad buying, writing video scripts to sell your product or service, creating the kind of large production ads we're known for, even making short ads using nothing but your cell phone. If you're looking to use video marketing to take your business to the next level, Harmon Brothers University has the course for you.
Our students have seen incredible growth in their businesses by implementing what they learned in our courses. Take these reviews as living proof.
We've now got multiple campaigns that are in the millions of views and in the multiple millions of dollars in sales. Within a week, we're close to 10 million views, over $1 million in sales, and most impressively, we've covered 100% of the production costs in the first 24 hours of releasing it.
We saw immediate results. Sales went up 10x the first day.
The first video we did is over 30 million views. The most customers that we've ever acquired in a single month. I think we hit about 26,000 new customers.
Go to harmonbrothersuniversity.com to start accelerating your business's growth with video.